Now, through all, I mean, you come from a different room from an idea when it comes down to some of your products and some of the other startups that we interview. And what I really like with yours is, again, you have this vast knowledge ahead of time, you've migrated in, you have all this education. Now, through this whole process, what was some of the biggest and most memorable challenges that you basically faced early on, as opposed to, I mean, every event we always have something that's almost like, what shit hits the fan, what do we do? There's, you know, this is the bitching story where, man, don't do this is how I've succeeded. So tell us a little bit more about some of the challenges and how you were working.
I mean, there's a challenge literally every day. That's just the way that it is in startup land. Obviously, some are bigger than others. One major challenge, we were nearly acquired before our acquisition, and the company that nearly acquired us decided at the last minute to pull the plug and then copied our software and launched it. So that was not awesome. That's an understatement. And so at that point I had to decide, okay, what am I going to do about this? Am I going to spend the rest of my life in court filing paperwork, or am I going to focus on my product? And I talked to a lot of advisors, took a lot of counsel. We're still weighing the options at some point of potentially doing that, but for now we're not. We're going to take the high road, keep doing what we're doing, and avoid that. But that was extremely painful. The deal being pulled at the last minute was extremely painful. I was actually in Florida and got a phone call, and I'm sitting there going, okay, so now the next 12 months of my life are a little different than I thought. What other things? We realized pretty quickly, once we'd gone past our group of agency clients, that we were really ahead of the market. This was even before social media had gotten big. Like we were doing content marketing classification before social media, before Hootsuite, before any of these kinds of platforms. So we had to spend a lot of time kind of going, yes, this social is very important for content, but it's not content, it's part of content, it's a bigger context. So for about 3 or 4 years, the whole focus was on social listening and not on what we were doing. So we also learned that fighting against the grain or against the trend can be really hard, so you have to kind of stick that out. I think the thing that's really kept us going during those tough moments is that vision, that idea that we know that taxonomy is going to be absolutely critical to how data is used and how content is understood in the future. And bit by bit, we've been evangelizing in situations like this, and been able to successfully bring people on board with the idea.
Very interesting. So you're definitely way ahead of the curve. So how did you find that initially? Because I mean, it's that whole education part where people didn't understand. I mean, it's not even in their scope of understanding.
Yes,
so
that's
how
right.
early years of that education?
Well, it's still an education process today. I will tell you that I would walk into boardrooms in 2010, and other than people like HP who got the spreadsheets pretty quickly, I would say, content marketing measurement around action or taxonomy, and people would look at me like I literally had 4 heads. They're like, "What? I don't even understand what language you're speaking. Taxidermy? Is something being stuffed? What are you talking about?" When I have those conversations today, they've gone from blank stares and I don't even know what this one is saying to, this is a problem that we have. This is a solution to it. So we're still a little bit ahead of the market with this portion of things, but it's gotten a lot easier over the years.
Now, you're a little bit lucky, so you're talking about most of the acquisition stuff, and I guess early on in your business, how did you come down to the funding? Was it mostly self-funded? And tell us a little bit about your funding journey to get yourself up to par.
Great question. So yes, we invested a lot of our own money. The agency funded it for a while, and then we realized when we were spinning it out that we needed to find a home for the product. So I was fortunate enough to meet Marcus Daniels, who runs Highline VC. If any of you know Marcus, he's a really brilliant guy. He has an incredible vision when it comes to picking companies. We were in the first post-extreme startups cohort, I guess just before it morphed into Highline. So we went through that program. That was an amazing experience for us. That really led us into our acquisition path as well.
Now, what piece of advice would you have for, I guess, early startups right now, just starting to navigate the funding journey? What would be that one little piece of advice to say, this is what you should look at, this is where you should be?
My piece of advice to anybody who's starting a company now today is to prove your value proposition, get customers before you even think about funding. It's a lot harder to get somebody to take you seriously if you don't have people actually paying for your product. And that can be really hard at the beginning, especially if it's an idea that you've come up with yourself. I I myself can have I can have too much attachment to the ideas that we've turned into products sometimes. You have to be able to hear the hard truth about what a customer is going to say and what they're willing to pay. If they aren't willing to pay, you have to get to the point where somebody is willing to do that. And there's an old startup maxim that if you can get 10 people who don't know you to pay for something, then you can get 100 people to pay for something, and then 1,000 people to pay for something. But it's that first step, and that will put you in a much more advantageous position when you're looking for funding than to just have an idea and a concept that you think might do something. It gives you a lot more control if you actually have paying customers when you're in those negotiations with investors.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, my biggest thing is, again, just sitting there and being awed by some of the things you're saying. If you had like a magic mirror and you were able to look into it, what would be the one piece of advice that you were, what would be one thing that that really stood out and said, man, I really wish I would change this?
So I had an option at one point to, I guess the piece of advice I would give would be to focus. I had an option at one point to sell my agency and then focus on the product. And what I tried to do was keep both going. And that was a terrible mistake. I made some terrible hiring decisions. And because I was unable to focus on both, one of them started very quickly going down the drain, and thankfully it was not the product. So that was just a question of my overestimating my ability to manage multiple things at the same time. So my advice would be, now that I am still running 3 companies, focus is very important, especially in the very early days, because it's very easy to get distracted. And the other thing is, in the early days, it's the hardest. You're going to meet 10, if you meet 11 people, 10 of them are going to tell you it's a terrible idea, 1 will think it's sort of okay. And you have to have the faith and conviction in yourself to keep going, to keep talking to people, to find the right people, that might be the 50th or the 60th or the 70th conversation, but keep going.
What other piece of advice would you have for, like, you're a mentor right now, you're mentoring everybody. What's that one piece of advice you would have for early startup? You know what, I want to take my idea from the concept directly to start seeing if this is the right thing to do.
That's a great question. I think the best thing that startup founders can try and do to get their product out there and to really get feedback is to try and build a community. And I'm not talking about an enormous Facebook group or one of those LinkedIn groups that kind of has a message a week. It's really about finding 5 to 10 to 20 people who are interested in what you do enough to spend time with you figuring out whether this is just an idea, whether this is a product, whether this is a business, because those are 3 very different things. You may have a great product that may never be a business. So the more you're able to build a community of people who are interested in what you're doing or either trying to go through the same challenges or solve the same challenges, the better you're going to be situated when you do start taking something to market. Those people will give you feedback. They will become your first customers. They will refer to you to other people. So building that out from the outset is a foundation that can help you save a lot of costs, particularly around sales and marketing down the road, and potentially in research and innovation as well.
Okay, cool. So you mentioned before that your SqueezeCMM right now is in a little bit of transition as well, because it's just been acquired. Now, where do you see first SqueezeCMM, and where do you see yourself if you're able to develop certain things? Where do you see yourself in the next couple of years?
Well, I mean, my real passion and vision is around this idea of classification and taxonomy. I wrote a piece recently that you can find on our other site, B2B News Network. I also write for the Association of Canadian Advertisers, which is on their site too. Talking about how search and web content is fundamentally broken. When you think about the fact that I think it's 86% of people do not go past the first page of search results on Google, and that Google is 70 to 80% of search traffic, we're essentially saying that 99% of most web content is invisible and that you're not going to be able to find it. There has to be an alternate structure other than just link-based popularity for finding things, because it's so heavily weighted in content that's been around for a long time or that has established some level of popularity. If taxonomy through classification made, and when I talk about classification, I think the best example is the nonfiction section at the library. It is impossible to find a nonfiction book unless you use the Dewey Decimal System, because you can't do it by author, or by title, because those can be random. The only way you can do it is by the topic itself. If we think about applying that to web content at an infrastructure level, And there are a number of ways that this can be done. It makes everything about the web so much more usable. Now that is an enormous undertaking, obviously, but it's something that I'm very passionate about and something that I may end up doing for a while.
So it leads me, so where do you see yourself in the next couple of years? Is it
So,
in that area or?
Absolutely, I mean, this is always
Yeah.
something that I'm thinking about. But how does that actually work? So one of the things that we've done is we're building out SqueezeCMM. We've also built a site called B2B News Network. And what we do for our clients through that, we use Squeeze, it's embedded in the site. If you're interested, check out B2B News Network. We actually offer companies that are B2B startups in particular the opportunity to place your content on our site and drive leads. So that's one other thing that I'm focused on is helping B2B companies that may have low amounts of traffic on their site find a place that conversions can actually happen. And then we use do the classification for that. So the other thing that I am working on, and I'm really killing my whole focus message here, but one of the things that we realized as we were building B2B and Squeeze and measuring the content was that, let's face it, most content is really not very good, especially in B2B. It's self-promotional, it's we're the best, and here's why our rates are awesome. So when we started looking at some of the response rates from our customers' content, we were like, this is not attracting an audience. So we came up with a new concept of content, and what we started developing is business graphic novels. So we've done some business graphic novels for SAP explaining the concept of in-memory databases. So if you're a layperson that's not very technical, an in-memory database is not going to have any meaning for you whatsoever. However, if you combine that with a story, with pictures, with narrative, and you tell it that way, the absorption is better, the attention is better, people respond to the content better. So I'm looking at how all of those three things, the content itself, the platform, the channels, and the analytics can come together to better drive visibility for businesses and make a better match between businesses and their customers.
Oh, cool. So, like I said, you mentioned before that if there's anything that we can do to help businesses, let us know. The same thing with you. If there's a way that you want us to push this information out directly to our members, believe me, by all means, let us know so we can do that. We can use.
We would love that. So SqueezeCMM.com, please check it out. There's a place right on the homepage where you can try it out. You can type in a URL and then add some metadata to it. You can get a trial account for 15 days, see if different channels are working. I didn't want to turn this into an infomercial, and I promise that if you do try it out, please let us know. We'd love to know what you think.
A little infomercial as well. Now, since this is basically over, I want your opinion. So this is all up to you guys now. It's your turn. You ask, bombard her with questions. If there's anything that really strikes your fancy, if you have something that you really want to go back on, this is your time to ask her any questions you have. Go for it. Michael?
I have a question regarding the actual mechanics of growing
Yes.
from an initial standpoint.
Great question. Yeah.
Did you start with sort of developing a full encompassing team when you grew? Or was it yourself and then you hired on staff to develop like that?
That's right. I have a co-founder who also happens to be my life partner. So we work in the business together. He's the technical side, I'm the marketing
See,
side.
Meredith, keep me. I like that.
And that works really well for us. That obviously is not something that everybody has. I would recommend that you try and start with somebody who has some marketing background and somebody who has a technical background, because those are the two hardest things.
Perfect. Yep.
Actually, along those lines, at what point in the life of your businesses or the businesses you've been a part of, have you noticed that, or was there ever, your focus and priority was more about personnel, recruiting, development, versus the initial vision? Because at some point, I'm sure, in order to
Always. It always is. I mean, hiring is always the most important part, and it is something that is very difficult to do. I was talking to somebody yesterday, actually, I think it was last week, and we were having a conversation, and I'm like, I've made so many terrible decisions around this. Just like 50% of most entrepreneurs' decisions around personnel or partners or hiring are terrible. So I would say that if you can afford to get some advice from the experts and work with recruiters, it's actually sometimes a pretty worthwhile investment. And I'm not sure I'm completely answering your question, but
So, I mean, like, is there a point on a graph that which early on it's vision, it's excitement, it's motivating, it's having the
It's
launch.
still team, it's still
And then
team.
at what point is it like, I gotta focus all my energy on building and not so
Right.
much about the idea? Is there a critical point? Is it the number of people? Is it kind of, is it about, as we build our traction and we get motivated, right, or
Yeah. One of the things we found is that when you hit around 20 people, there's a level of complexity that starts that is very difficult to manage. So at one point we brought in a COO and a president to actually manage the business so that I was focused on business development and vision. There are different points in different companies depending on what kind of company it is. You'll sometimes hit that point earlier in a pure product startup than you will in a services business, for example. So I think, there's a lot of writing that's been done about this problem just because it's something that's so common. For us, we didn't take a particularly scientific approach. It was kind of like, okay, we've got a new thing, we don't have any for this, we think we've got enough revenue to support it, we're going to make a hire. This isn't always the optimal way to do things. But sometimes back of the napkin is the way you gotta go too. The one thing that I will say is you do have to let some of those decisions go pretty quickly, pretty early. And for me, the hardest part was giving up either the idea of hiring or the product management side. But as a founder, you always have to get used to the idea that what you're supposed to be doing is replacing yourself in those functions, making yourself obsolete. So that you can start to do the really high value work, which is why you founded the business in the first place.
At what point do you start thinking, okay, you're at that 20 plus, and then now you're really start concentrating on the company culture and really developing the culture, and then make sure they follow your vision. How's that process?
That's really just a matter of making sure that when you hire people, you're hiring for the right qualities, the right propensities, and that they buy into the vision themselves.
Okay.
It's a very important part of the interviewing process to outline, like, this is the kind of company we are. We do work really late at night. We tend to be very available. We're constantly online. We're not necessarily in the office. We're very quick communicators. We aren't necessarily particularly sensitive. We're really very truthful and candid with each other.
Yeah.
Those are all elements of culture that can either help a company succeed or fail. So I think you really need to focus on hiring for fit once you're at a certain size rather than physical.
Perfect. I saw that. Yeah, Frank.
So with Google's new deep learning algorithm that they applied recently on their search engine, does it affect the whole perspective of what you do from the angle of search engine optimization?
So we don't actually do search engine optimization. We are strictly about classification, which is actually adding another layer of data to the entire infrastructure. So in other words, if you go to a web page, if classification were in place, there would be metadata about the topic of the page, different aspects of what the content format is, who the target audience is, for example. So the deep learning algorithms and anything else AI related would add that to their data streams as another source, another data point. Whether or not it would actually affect SEO, the whole idea of SEO is fairly artificial, right? It's a construct by Google and the other search engines to make it possible for things to be found. Is it very functional? My argument would be no. That we need a better system for categorization just because SEO is essentially rendered so much invisible. How that actually is going to translate with deep learning and other AI is completely up for grabs right now. I don't think anybody knows how that's going to look in 10, 15 years.
Interesting.
You mentioned your competitor Hootsuite and Clip4. So on a daily basis, weekly basis, or how do you analyze yourself against the competition
Sure.
in your meetings? Are you guys looking at both prices? Are you looking at value-added services?
Yep.
I know in the past you said you guys were way ahead of the curve.
Yep.
So how do you really, or how frequently do you sit back and reassess yourself against your competitors?
It's a really good question. We don't actually, everybody says this of course, our only real competitor is the company who copied us. Hootsuite we would consider a complement and not a competitor, same with Uberflip, because we're really just focused on analytics. However, it is something you need to be monitoring constantly, and that is actually something that I spend a lot of time doing. I am a bit of an information sponge. I probably spend way too much time reading Twitter, just seeing the news that's coming in. I consume a lot of information that way just because that's what allows me to keep ahead of what's going on. I think that focusing on your competition, though, is a really dangerous path. Because if you have a vision, it is very easy to have that compromise by saying, well, if we just build that feature, then we'd be like these guys, but better. And the reality is, you think that is never how it actually pans out in the end. So I'll give you an example. We've been asked for a long time to build a publishing component. There's no publishing in Squeeze right now. So if you have a piece of content, you can't take it and publish through Squeeze. The only thing you can actually do is create the taxonomy, the link that will then go out. And so we've had a number of debates about whether or not we should actually ever build a publishing platform. And what it's allowed us to do instead is connect into those and not be considered. So I think you need to be aware of your competition, but I think the sort of relentless competitive focus that a lot of organizations have on their competition can hinder them more than it can help. I'm just going to add one more thing on that because it's going to sound a little bit out there. But one of the lessons I learned about working in Japan was shut off from the entire rest of the world for 150 years. And during that time, you had Japanese culinary culture, you had poetry, you had calligraphy. Pretty much everything that makes Japan unique was founded during that time. There's a case for isolation, in other words, and it's very hard to be isolated in our world today where we're always on, we're always accessible to information. But if you can insulate yourselves a little bit sometimes, it means that you're not subjected to the same sort of homogeneity of thinking. And that's a hard thing and a hard thing to practice for discipline, but it can be very, very useful if you're in product development.
Good one.
Okay, so Jen, this is kind of going along the competitor's question. So you are targeting enterprise and mid-sized companies, right?
Yes.
And a lot of them are already using Marketo, Adobe Marketing Cloud, and these guys say they can do everything. How do you convince them that your product not only supplements it, but is better than whatever solution these marketing automation companies already have?
So same kind of thing. Marketing automation is a fantastic technology. What it does not handle particularly well is inbound. So what we're able to do is then take our data and pull it into marketing automation. For us, it's relatively easy because the reality is that nobody has the data set that we have. So when we go into an organization and they say we have Marketo, we have Hootsuite, we have Omniture, we have Google Analytics, we have Spreadfast, we have Sprinkler. It's all great, but it doesn't do what we do. So until we see a lot of competitors cropping up, we have a pretty simple value proposition against that. Our challenge is that we're small and we don't have huge marketing budgets, so we have to pretty much do things on a guerrilla or a one-to-one basis, and that's one of the limitations of the way that we're set up.
So for you guys to scale, it's really just a factor of being able to get out there and educate people.
Exactly.
Perfect. Yep.
I want you to talk about that first meeting with the ad agency that you had with HP.
Yes.
And, because I'm kind of at a similar junction. Who did you talk to? Did the conversation get, were the analytics people or the business people? And how did you make the whole, basically end-to-end, like what happened?
Sure. So we were working with HP. We had a relationship with them on the services side. So we did our first graphic novel with HP in 2009. And they said to us, we've got this problem with understanding what content is actually working. And I said, oh, well, we have something that we're working on that might be related to that. So one of them was, they were both marketing people, but one was a business analyst on the marketing side. I literally met them in a coffee at a Starbucks in Cupertino, and they came in and met me. I showed them my spreadsheets. I was like, I have no idea whether these people are getting it or not, like literally no clue. Did the presentation, they left, it was probably an hour meeting, and I had no idea what had happened for a week, and then they called me and said, they asked me how much it was, and I said, it's $2,000 a month. Literally, it's $2,000 a month. And they said, okay, we'll sign up for a year. So I think the need for them to understand, they had invested so much in content and they had absolutely no idea what was happening with it, that it was critical for them to make that decision. So if you can get into one of those situations, that's really good.
You said some really interesting things about trying to decide if it's a business, if it's an idea, if it's a whatever.
Product, yep.
And then there's the whole idea of focus, which you talked about too.
Yep.
So what's your process to get it to decide if it's like a cause, a business, a foundation, an whatever it's going to be? So how do you work through that?
It's conversations. It's conversations with people, with customers, with people who are, with investors, with prospective investors, with executives at Fortune 50 companies, with executives at banks. It is just a constant series of, is this something that's useful? How useful is it? And how many people are going to find it useful? And really those three things are going to tell you just how big your idea is. And the thing is, you may not even know it at the beginning. Like look at Uber. Uber started as a black car service. Like they were just hiring limos for people, and now they're like, they just got a $3.5 billion investment from the Saudi government. You never know where something is going to end up. You just got to keep following the thread. And the thing that's hard sometimes is that people will often tell you your idea is smaller or bigger than it is. People who may not necessarily have a lot of experience or know what they're talking about. So just make sure that you're talking to the right people too. Choose your feedback sources and your mentors carefully.
Dennis?
So yeah, in the start you said like you should get feedback from this community, a
Yes,
small
the
community.
yeah.
So how do you build that community? Like,
Great question. It really is about finding people who are as passionate about the subject that you're talking about as you are. And so I'll give you an example. We worked with HP for a number of years, and then a guy in a different division of HP came across our software one day and became our most ardent and impassioned evangelist. This guy just loves taxonomy. He loves it. It makes it so much easier for him to do his job. When you can find those people, you grab them. You say, you are amazing. Can we work with you? Can we tap your brain? Can you jump on conference calls with us? You make them feel like they're a part of something, and they become a part of something. And that kind of relationship, those people, especially at the beginning, can be really hard to find. So when you do find them, you really want to try and maintain that relationship as strongly as you can.
makes sense.
That's why they get an ambassador like that, just that's always on your side.
Exactly.
Perfect.
Exactly.
Any other question? Yep.
Yes. What's your process of naming your company or your products?
Oh, I have the worst process. The worst. So my agency was called Sequentia, and I was working at a company called Cognacase. And so I was working at a company called Cognacase. I decided that I was gonna, if I got 3 clients, I was gonna leave and start an agency. So I got 2, and I was just on the verge of hiring the 3rd. And I was like, oh my gosh, I need to figure out, signing the 3rd I should say, I need to figure out a name. So this is a terrible story. Emailed my ex-boyfriend, name me for a company, emails me back, Sequentia, sold! That's literally the whole story. With Squeeze, we Squeeze the naming process.
Not sure I know that one.
So Squeeze was first called LLG, lead something, I can't even remember. And then we had an internal naming competition. And the name that won was Glengarry, from Glengarry Glen Ross. Which, you know, we realized pretty quickly that our customers were not really super excited about the option of steak knives or, you know, so it wasn't a particularly positive connotation. And we're like, okay, what are we doing? We're helping people interpret the results. So now we're gonna call it Interpreter. And the whole time we had this short domain, sqz.co. And the domain was amazing. People were like, oh, that's really catchy. And then finally one day we're like, maybe we should just call it Squeeze. And it took us about 3 years to get to that point. So I would not take any advice from me on naming.
So it had nothing to do with you measuring the content of your name?
Nothing. Nothing whatsoever. And in fact, what's really funny is the more I talk to other entrepreneurs, I find out that their name is actually kind of a revisionist history. They're like, we picked the name and then we're like, we're going to retrofit it with all these things. We were talking to a guy at a company today, and he's like, well, we had this domain, and so we decided to name the product a domain, and it just kind of worked. There's a lot less science to this than you think. On the other hand, there are companies that will pay. I remember reading at the height of the .com era in Salon, a company that had paid $500,000 for a product name, and the product name that they were presented with was Jam Cracker. And I believe that article is still on salon.com. Check it out today. It was about the craziness of naming. And this naming guru was like, yeah, we've got this great name. We're just waiting for somebody to come along and pick it up. I'm not sure that's exactly the way it's supposed to work.
Perfect. Any other?
I have one more, sorry. Just nowadays, in terms of globalization and access to education,
Yes.
what's your thoughts on like outsourcing some of the talent or some of the things? Because you've said in the past, hiring a person and then letting them go is such a costly
Yep.
affair.
Yep.
So why not just outsource it? Or what are your thoughts on outsourcing?
We actually work with a lot of clients who do outsourcing. It's not something we've ever done. I'm honestly not sure why. I think there's tremendous advantages, including just the ability to get work done overnight. I do think that our CTO has a little bit of a control thing going on, so it's a little bit hard for him not to be able to actually meet and speak with the people. But I know a lot of businesses that have been very successful at outsourcing, so I certainly would recommend it under the right circumstances.
Perfect. Yep.
You mentioned that you wrote for, I think, Advertising Network. I didn't get the name.
The Association of Canadian Advertisers.
And what is your beat? Like, what do you obviously about
Well, it's just a
advertising?
column. It's just a column on it's actually called Organic Matters. So they focus on the paid side, and I focus on how organic marketing.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I have a question about, you were talking about hiring and you made a lot of bad mistakes. What was the source of that? Was it the vetting process or?
It was more like I really wanted to hire people who were just like, and I am a creative, fairly chaotic at times, very lateral thinker, and people like me need structured people around them, and so that was not it.
Gas on the fire, gas on the fire.
Gabe over here has been with me through a lot of this. He'll tell you that, yes.
Is this the husband?
No.
Perfect. Anybody else have any other questions before we head it up?
Another one, but.
Okay, go
Yeah,
for it.
After.
Go for it.
No, I love talking.
Yeah, you said an interesting thing about finding people to replace you.
Yes.
I thought that was a very interesting thought process regarding the hiring process.
Yep.
So did you go to the extent of, I can't remember if you said you found COO, did you find a CEO?
President.
President?
Yeah.
So you would be what?
So I was the CEO and I had a president working for me. But at one point, really long story, we actually brought in a CEO to run Squeeze. Didn't work out very well, but it was for the right reasons. My advice on that would be, if you're a founder, try and hang on to the CEO role as long as you can, because you can't replace the vision. When I said replace myself, what I meant was your job as the leader is to make yourself obsolete, right? So your job is to bring people in who are able to do the parts of your job that maybe you don't do as well, or they can do them in a way that's better, so that you can start to really elevate and do the highest value work.
Highest value work, can you consider like the coming up with the genius-ness?
Recruiting. When you get to that point, it's all about people. So it's about bringing talent in and the vision. Yeah, those are, and actually business development. CEOs are always going to be, and founders are always going to be your top salesmen.
Anybody else have any last questions?
One last question.
Perfect.
So, just mentioned the vision. So what is Squeeze's current vision? Do you guys change it every like 6 months? Or
We definitely
is it
do
gonna-
not. We
is it
want
gonna be the
to.
same vision 5 years from now?
We want to taxonomize the world. Our goal is to try and classify as much as we can about digital, so that people can actually make their data more usable and understand what content is working. So, that is very unlikely to change, unless some fantastic instant taxonomification technology comes along, and I might have to think about something different, but they're working. I don't think it's a builder. for now, that's our focus.
Great, any questions?
But you focus on big companies, right? This is your customer.
We have to date, I mean, there's a certain truism in startup land that if you have the big logos, then you're gonna be able to get the smaller logos too.
So you also cater to smaller organizations?
That's right, we also work with agencies, we've got a real focus on agencies right now, and we're coming down market, we're kind of testing, you know, what's the small size organization that can get value out of us.
Perfect. Anybody else? There we go.
I have a comment.
All right.
Can I make a comment?
Yes.
I think it's interesting what you said about the replacing yourself, because I kind of went through that with you.
Yeah.
From sort of the other side of the fence, I guess, my comment would be that, you know, if you're the visionary, if you've come up with this idea, part of the challenge is translating that idea, not just into the product or service, but to the people that are going to kind of take that show on the road. Otherwise, the number of hats that you have to wear. So the challenge is for, you know, Jen and I have been through this a number of times. Jen sit down and go da 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 da, and I go, okay, but I have to go and tell that to somebody else.
I'm like,
well, yeah, but doesn't it? It makes perfect. There it is. It makes perfect sense. It's right there. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't think that. So you have to find people who can, I think, play a middle person role, because sometimes when you're out there and you're trying to make money at what it is you do, and if you don't eventually make money, you're not going to stay in business. There isn't going to be a vision. There isn't going to be a company. Right? And so you need to kind of have this translationable aspect to it. And what I've found with startup visionaries is they're not always the people to be translating the information, at least from a business development perspective. They can do it, but even that is dangerous, right? Because you kind of play, you know, then you're in sales and trying to do the vision and back to sales and back to the vision. So I think, from the other side of the fence, I think it's, you know, really translating information.
There's something called the curse of knowledge. There's a great book called Made to Stick that just has some great principles, like a lot of people have read it. And I am so deep inside the curse of knowledge, like I'm like, what do you mean taxonomy is obvious? How can you not see this? This is ridiculous. So it's critical to have people like Gabe who can say, okay, I understand that, but let's break it down. What does this actually look like in terms of an engagement? How do we help communicate to people what this actually is? And that's still an ongoing challenge for us.
So regarding your major vision around taxonomy, or taxonomize the world, assuming you had like a magic wand and like the practicality of what you have to do wasn't limitations, how do you think that would take place?
So I think I actually laid some of this out in my article. I think it would need to be done at an infrastructure level, like ICANN would need to take it on. It would need to be something that would be embedded into the way that your apps, web pages, everything would work. It would be difficult for me to say that because so much of these things are iterative, right? You get a little farther, you get along in the process, and then something you didn't think about happens, so then you take a slightly new direction. I have an idea of what a taxonomized world could look like, but the exercise of actually putting it into place is going to change that vision a number of times, there's no question. So I think that if I started with an idea of what the end was actually going to look like in mind, it probably would change 13 times before it actually got there.
Perfect. I see one question. Yeah.
So when you went to HP, you actually sold something that wasn't completely measurable.
It wasn't, it was spreadsheets, yeah. Like I didn't even have a software platform.
That's not normal.
Well, okay, let me just say one thing on this, that there's a great adage that anything that sits in Excel is a business, right? So if you're processing data of some kind in Excel and you can automate that, that's a business. That's essentially what we were doing. We had a spreadsheet, we had all the columns across the top, we had all their links, it had check marks. I'm like, does this make sense to you? And they're like, no. So then showing them, imagine this in a dashboard, in a grid with each of these, so that was essentially how we did it. I don't think you could use, you know, Excel to explain AI or something like that, but in our case it worked.
Perfect. Anybody else have any other last questions to go around? Going once, going twice, 3 times, okay. With that being done, I just want to thank you so much, Jen, for coming out. It was amazing. One thing I'll basically say is right now, for any new startup that there is out there, if you want to promote your product, you want to have your 2 to 3 minutes up here at their next event, either next month, the month after that, let us know so we can schedule in. I mean, we're here for you. You know, if you want to reach out to us directly and, you know, you have a company you want us to interview or have on board, let us know. Don't be shy. We can't grow community without your support and without your knowledge. I mean, otherwise it's just what I want to have. I mean, and that can only go so far. We want to make sure it grows organically, you know? So with that being said, Eva, do you have anything you want to say directly to the group? No? We have an opportunity right now. If you want to network, you can do that. And then we have an opportunity of going down to Ocho if you'd like to do that and continue on with some drinks. It's all up to you. It's free time for you guys to network and talk now. All right, enjoy it.
Thanks, everyone.